I want to go right to Keith Kellogg, Lieutenant General, U.S. Army, former National Security Advisor to Mike Pence. General, how are you, sir?
Good, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Great to talk to you. I have tons of questions for you. Let's go back to the beginning. 20 years ago. Been doing this for 20 years in Afghanistan. Where can you pinpoint? Obviously, there's many moments. Can you pinpoint one in particular, one moment when it started to go wrong?
Yeah, it was probably 18 years ago. We went in there. We were righteous when we went in. We went after Al Qaeda. We went after Osama bin Laden. We decimated Al Qaeda. We got it. Bin Laden in Pakistan, and colleague Sheikh Mohammed, the brainstorm of 9/11. He's sitting in Guantanamo jail. The problem is, Mike, in my belief, that after we did what we should have done, which was chase them and kill them as appropriate, we should have said, okay, our job is done, and then move away from Afghanistan. In fact, what we started to do was nation building, and it started to go down from there. We started to create something that just in our liking that wasn't going to work in Afghanistan. I mean, Alexander the Great in 327 BC.
Who decided that? Who and I'd love it if we could get to the specific person, but even if you can get to the where, people from this think tank or this school of thought, who decided that we should go down the nation building track ultimately?
Well, I think, I have a real fault with a lot of very senior, now retired and also actual military leaders that were 3 and 4 stars at the time that said, well, we can go into nation building and start working and create this country and turn them into Jeffersonian Democrats. That was never going to work. It's a totally different culture. And somebody just didn't look at history. We hoped that something was going to happen. And hope is not a good course of action. So I think if you go back and look at the whole group of leaders that we had at the time, and unfortunately we created that. It was self-creating where it became habit and everybody was invested in it. And even today, the senior leaders are invested in it. I mean, I've had a lot of discussions with the senior leaders who were there and retired from there, and they bear some of the responsibility for this, of putting this in the situation, not the young men and women out there. And by the way, before I go any further, I want to say thank you to the young men and women who served in Afghanistan for 20 years, and those young troopers who are on the ground as we speak today that are fighting to hold what they've got right there. They're great American heroes. And we were looking at something internal to a country like Afghanistan and worried about terrorism when everybody else was looking at something different. And I just think the leadership needs to look at that. We just need to look at the leadership that we had and frankly, probably remove a lot.
I want to talk about your time in the White House during President Trump and Mike Pence's time. They also wanted to get out of Afghanistan. And it's interesting, we got to find some nuance here because I don't necessarily criticize Biden for wanting to leave Afghanistan. And I'm curious your take on maybe what size footprint we should keep there or should have kept there forever, like we do in Germany and Japan today, or just totally get out. So we can have that. It's a really interesting conversation. It's the way that it all went down, which is terrible. How was Trump's plan different than Biden's execution? And did Trump just want to kick the can down the road forever too? What was his deal?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And I was lucky. I spent 1,461 days in the White House, and I saw it all. His plan was conditions-based. And we worked at well over 18 months ago. We sat down with Pompeo and we sat down with the whole team and we said, okay, as we go through these gates or conditions, we're going to withdraw troops as we go down there. The last gate or condition we had was we were going to hold 2,500 troops with air power in Afghanistan until they had successful intra-Afghan peace talks between the Taliban and Ghani of the government to create a basically reconciliation government. Here's the big difference, too. President Trump picked up the phone and called Mullah Baradar, who was the chief negotiator for the Taliban, not once but twice in the Oval Office. And he was very clear in Trumpian terms of what would happen if he screwed around with the United States or what happened or he didn't fulfill it. And he got it.
What did he say?
I'm sorry?
What did he say?
He basically said, again, in Trumpian terms, that if Baradar harmed an American or something went bad, that he knew where he lived, he knew where his family lived, he knew where all his buddies lived, and we were coming to get him. And we proved that with Soleimani, and we proved that with Baghdadi, and he got it. I mean, he really did get it. Baradar owed us a little bit, too. We got Baradar out of a Pakistani jail to make sure he could do the negotiations for the Taliban going forward. But the president was really quite clear. And that's your big difference. I know that Biden's never talked to Baradar. He made it clear to the Taliban, this is what's going to happen. He made it clear to Ghani as well, this is what's going to happen. But we were going to hold until that last condition was met, and then we'd have a reconciliation government going forward. I don't know what would have happened, Mike, what would happen with a reconciliation government, but that was the whole intent behind it. It sure would have been a lot different than the Taliban sitting in our embassy right now or the presidential palace. I know that.
Trump got criticized for talking to the Taliban. I remember that, for meeting with them, meeting with some of the leaders.
Yeah, Mike, and here's what gets me. There was a lot of criticism. Trump actually said, let's bring him back to Camp David. People fell on the floor when he said that, but I said, wait a second. I told people, wait a second. Camp David Accords, in the late 1900s, where we brought back Sadat and Menachem Begin from Israel and Egypt and spent 12 days at Camp David and pounded out a peace agreement. That's what the president was looking at. And you can't. So why would you criticize or try to get for peace there? Everybody said, well, you can't bring him back. I think he had it right. I think we should have brought him back, put him on the ground, and said, we're going to feed you, cold pizza and warm beer until you determine if you go forward.
Is there any strategic reason for us to have stayed there, like to help our combat readiness in that part of the world, or is there none of that even?
No, Mike, I don't believe we should have stayed there. I think you can fight over the horizon. We have proven that. Look, if people don't believe us in our ability to fight over the horizon, then pick up the phone and call Soleimani. Oh, that's right, he's dead. Pick up the phone and call Baghdadi. Oh, that's right, he's dead. We can fight over the horizon very, very well. What we needed to do was to focus to the left and right, Russia and China, because they both create an existential threat for America. We can handle terrorism from a distance. And people didn't look at it that way. They thought that was the most important thing we were doing. Is it critical? Yeah. Is it important? Yeah. But we can do better than that. We're much better military than that.
China or Afghanistan is going to become a Chinese colony basically now, right? They've already almost recognized them as the legitimate government. They're just about to, and there's plenty of resources there, et cetera, and they're going to become deeply embedded in Afghan life. No?
Well, they might do that, but kind of my attitude, and I probably would have said the same thing or advised President Trump. Let him recognize Afghanistan, and we'll recognize Taiwan. I said, you want to play that game, we can play that game. We're better than you are, we're bigger than you are, we're tougher than you are, and we can play that game a lot better than you.
Wow. That was deep and insightful. I want more of that. Like, subscribe, get more.